Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and does Magic Find still have a place in aRPGs? Let's discuss. This has been a hot topic in the Path of Exile 2 community lately, with item rarity occupying precious item affix slots. We'll talk about that, some other PoE 2 feedback, and we'll also cover some Diablo 4 news, as well as a few other gaming news stories of the week, like Steam's biggest revenue-driving games of the year. But before we move on, a word from this video's sponsor, Boot.dev. If you're interested in learning programming, either as a hobby or a profession, check this out. Boot.dev has gamified learning to code. They've literally built an online programming course into a fun programming RPG. You gain experience, you complete quests, you level up, you earn achievements, and you can rank on a global leaderboard, all while learning fully at your own pace. Boot.dev believes that the smartest way to learn to code is to ensure you're never bored. With this program, you'll learn the programming languages Python and Go. You're going to learn back-end web development from start to finish. And the program's designed to get you to write a ton of code, since they believe that practice is the only way to really learn coding. And while programmers in the US can earn six-figure incomes, this isn't some get-rich-quick scheme. Boot.dev believes that you have to dive deep into mastering the fundamentals and wants you to be as prepared as possible before you go job hunting. If you ever find yourself struggling, you can consult with Boots, an AI bear wizard that's been trained in every lesson and can walk you through your issues. He won't just give you the answers, he'll try to get you to grasp the concepts and find the solution yourself. But if you're ever really stuck or you just want to compare your code to the instructors, there are solutions available for every challenge on the site. So click the link in the description and use my code Rhykker to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. Alright, starting off with Path of Exile 2. The game's numbers are still looking fantastic. 3 weeks in, and we're still hitting, on average, 350,000 Steam concurrent daily players. For context, Path of Exile 1's highest ever peak on Steam was 228,000. And that's on a free-to-play game, whereas the only way to play PoE 2 currently is to buy early access. Despite being a more challenging game than PoE 1, PoE 2 is vastly more accessible from a complexity standpoint. And Elden Ring's success proves that there is a big audience of gamers that are okay with a challenging game. Now, myself, I haven't had much of a chance to play really anything recently with the holidays, but I found myself actually starting to itch to make a new character and play through the campaign again. And if you'll remember, right after I finished the campaign, I said that I was not eager to repeat it again on another character. So apparently my feelings are changing. Now, if I had to guess, I think at least part of this is motivated from me having really enjoyed my campaign experience, and then being really excited for Endgame, and then maybe not finding mapping quite as fun as I found the campaign. I know that I like the metagame of the Endgame, like I like the whole Atlas part and picking maps to run and stuff, but the actual running of maps is just kind of okay for now. And again, I feel like one of the strongest aspects of Path of Exile 2 is the bosses, these tough fights that you often have to try a couple of times to master and learn and overcome, the mechanics and everything. And while you do run into bosses in mapping, it's not the same experience because you pretty much either kill the boss easily or it kills you, and then you don't get another attempt, so you're robbed of that feeling of getting revenge and succeeding after learning, adapting, getting better. Again, it just feels like two completely different games. There's the campaign game and then the endgame game. And like during the campaign, death just feels as though it's a normal part of the game. Just like in a Dark Souls game, right? Die again. But then in the end game, death becomes increasingly punishing that it feels like you're just playing the game wrong if you're dying. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to trying a second character now. I might first farm up some currency on my main to be able to better craft stuff on my alt. I'm thinking to go in Sorceress. And I just think Act 1 really was my favorite part of the game. The pacing, the enemies, the locations, the music, the final Act 1 boss, the boss fight itself. It's just such a great introduction to the game. Just a really, really solid act. But let's get on to the big debate in the community this week, which is all around item rarity. Or as we used to call it back in my day, Magic Find. A lot of the community seems opposed to the reintroduction of item rarity as an affix on gear, because they say it was an issue that was actually solved in PoE 1 by removing item quantity as an affix. But let's take a step back and explain the situation. So, a possible affix that you can get on gear is item rarity, which increases the chances of your drops being of a higher rarity. Simple enough. You stack a bunch of item rarity on your gear, your drops will become significantly better. Item rarity increases the chance for an item to be converted to a higher tier. So more magic items, more rares, more uniques. Even the quality of affixes on your gear can be higher, but this also applies to things like maps. So your maps have a better chance of rolling as rares, and even currency. Your currency is a better chance of being upgraded to a higher tier of currency. So in short, this is a really, really powerful affix. People running Endgame do comparisons of no item rarity and stacking item rarity on their gear, and the difference in drops is night and day. So why is this a problem? Well, like I said, it costs an affix. Technically multiple affixes, you want to stack it wherever you can. So you're giving up either more damage or more survivability for better drops. In theory, this is a cool concept. I remember getting my first major magic find item in Diablo 2 and being wowed by it. Oh man, you mean if I equip this dagger, I get a 100% better chance of getting magic items? That's awesome, right? Well, in practice, weakening your build in order to get better drops just isn't fun. An aRPG is a power fantasy, and lowering your character's power in order to get better drops is just not a fun trade-off to make. In theory, it's an interesting build choice, but it's not fun to play. Ultimately, we're chasing power so that we can get good item drops as efficiently as possible. That's kind of what aRPGs boil down to. And if the most efficient thing is to lower our power and stack Magic Find instead, if that's what results in a higher efficiency of loot acquisition, that's not the most fun way to play the game. Worse, it further confines what the best meta builds will be. It's no longer just about having enough damage output and survivability to take on the content in the game. Now it's also about having so much damage and so much survivability that you can sacrifice a good amount of it to stack item rarity. And this is all why I grew to dislike Magic Find in Diablo 2. I disliked it in Diablo 3 as well. They had that when the game launched, and I was glad when they removed it. I'm okay with Magic Find existing as a system that does not come at the cost of power. So either we get a new itemization slot just for Magic Find affixes, or maybe something in the Atlas tree, or maybe higher tier maps just naturally have more item rarity, or maybe we just naturally get more item rarity as we go higher in level. And part of what exacerbates everything in Path of Exile 2 specifically is trade. By far, the most effective way to power up in PoE 2 is to farm currency, then use that currency to buy gear upgrades. So instead of getting what you want as a drop from monsters, or by crafting, you instead spend a few hours to earn enough money to buy the stuff that you want. And what I've just described to you is a job. That's a job. You trade in hours of your time for money and use that money to buy stuff. Now to clarify, I'm not opposed to trading in principle. I want people who love trading to be able to play the trade game to their heart's content, and I think a lot of people just generally would like to be able to trade now and then for like a very specific item. But what I don't like is when trading is by far the most effective way to power up, even for people who don't like trading. And with PoE 2 currently lacking the deterministic crafting options of PoE 1, trading is more powerful than ever, and therefore item rarity nets you more currency per hour, meaning you can buy better stuff quicker. And even for solo self-found players, currency is what we use to upgrade and craft on our gear. The difference is, if you trade, then all of your currency that you find can be spent meaningfully on a shiny new piece of gear. But if you're self-found, then most of your currency is basically getting thrown in the garbage because you're just slamming and praying, hoping for a good affix roll, and then junking the result most of the time. So just everything about the system favors trade players. Now here's the thing, Last Epoch solved all this. First off, they don't have Magic Find on gear. Second, your character can join one of two guilds, a trade guild or a self-found guild. And people from either guild can still play with each other, but if you're in the self-found guild, you can't pick up other people's drops, they can't pick up your drops, and you can never trade. But you get better Magic Find in return, as well as the ability to further tailor what kind of drops you get. It's a brilliant solution. And yes, it's still more efficient to play in the trade guild, but not by so much that it makes the self-found guild feel terrible. And they even gamified this whole system by letting you progress through upgrades in your guild so you can change your magic find stuff and alter it and enhance it. A lot of us play aRPGs to experience gear progression through gameplay, not by going to browse items in a website. And right now, PoE 2 isn't designed to serve our tastes very well, but a few changes can get us right there. And speaking of trading from a website, I know the devs never wanted to add an in-game trade house in the past because they felt that trading needed to have friction behind it in order to keep it balanced. Basically, the more miserable it is to trade, the less you are going to trade. Therefore, trading isn't as OP. And I've never been in favor of the idea of making an experience unpleasant on purpose as a solution to something. I've always felt that it just meant we haven't yet figured out what the best solution is. And again, Last Epoch, they found it. If you have the self-found guild, then there's no need to keep trading balanced against it, and you can have the in-game trade house and not worry about adding friction to it and making it less desirable for people that aren't trading. And I'm actually really hopeful now for something like that coming to PoE 2, because Jonathan Rogers said in an interview 10 months ago, quote, "People will no longer accept an aRPG that doesn't have instant buyouts for a trade system. So therefore, we will need to change. We have to move with the times. I don't want to have any excuses. If players are not enjoying something, we need to find a way to solve that problem. We will solve that problem. I will find a way." So overall, I'm looking forward to seeing how PoE 2 evolves over the next 6 months. I think they've nailed early game, which was most important, really going into early access. And then everything else is a solid base that can be tweaked or expanded upon. Oh, one last bit of feedback. I get that the devs don't want us cluttering the screen with damage numbers. Not going to advocate for adding damage numbers, but having a training dummy to help us gauge how much damage we do, or how much, when we're changing our gear, whether it's an action upgrade or not, that'd be really great. Diablo 4 has a little training room where you can select from a variety of training dummies, right? Like you select, okay, do I want a boss monster? Do I want a group of monsters? PoE can even expand on this, give us a bunch of customizable dummy options to simulate resistances and whatnot. Okay, one last bit of feedback. A sort button for the inventory would be great. Every other aRPG that has inventory Tetris has a sort button. It's time we get one in PoE as well. All right, on to some Diablo 4 news. Within about a week of the Goblin Event starting, all 5 tiers were completed. 40 million goblins were killed. And there's still a whole other week for the event to go on, so you have until January 2nd to log in and claim your prizes. The game also has a free trial ongoing until January 3rd for those who want to see what the Spiritborn is all about, and the game itself is on sale for up to 40% off. Now, outside of that, Polygon published an interesting article titled "Premium Live Service Games Are Failing. Why is Diablo 4 a Success?" The author posits that franchises like Destiny and Overwatch moved to free-to-play, away from premium, to survive in a world where premium live service games are going the way of the dodo. And what we mean by premium live service games is that you have to pay a fee to buy the game, and then there is also ongoing monetization of some kind. The author highlights 2 big recent flops: Rocksteady's Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, which was a $200 million loss for WB Games, and Sony's Concord, that was another multi-$100 million failure. In contrast, he says, quote, "Yet Blizzard's 2023 release, Diablo 4, is a certified hit, with big sales, a strong expansion in 2024, and apparently an avid audience. How did it buck the trend?" And then he calls back to an interview that Polygon conducted with Diablo boss Rod Ferguson back in November, in which Rod basically said that Blizzard didn't set out to make a live service game when they made Diablo 4. They set out to make a Diablo game. Rod said, quote, "I go back to the genre. Early on, there were these conversations. Is Diablo 4 a live service game, or should we roll credits and call it? And I was like, look, when you look at Diablo 3 and the millions of people that showed up every season, whether you want it or not, an aRPG is inherently a live service. The question is what you do about it. To me, when you're a Diablo-like," and I'll stop and remind you folks right now that this interview took place in November, that's before Rod's unfortunate tweet about Diablo-likes, people are going to look to play through the campaign, but then they're going to look to play what I call the 100 or the 1,000-hour game. They want to be able to continue this progression. They want to have the power fantasy. They want to go back to it over and over again. The author concludes that Diablo 4 worked because there was a market demand for a new Diablo game that could be played for hundreds and thousands of hours, and therefore that necessitated the game being a live service. Whereas in the case of Suicide Squad, people were already saying when the game was first previewed that it seemed like an odd fit for a live service model, and that Concord was made because the publishers wanted a live service game as opposed to there being market demand for a new hero shooter. Now, personally, I think it's just that Diablo sits in this place where it's kind of two games at once. It's the story playthrough, and then it's the 1,000-hour game. And that's how it's managed to make $1 billion in its first year. There's a sizable portion of the player base that got Diablo 4 mostly just to play through the campaign, be done, be satisfied, and move on to other games. Those of us in the community tend to overlook these people, but it's a lot of people. So if Diablo 4 were free to play, that's a huge portion of the player base effectively getting a free AAA cinematic experience. It'd be like giving away Elden Ring for free and adding cosmetic microtransactions to it, and a battle pass. It doesn't make sense. On the other hand, you also have the hardcore aRPG crowd who are looking for that 1,000-hour endgame experience. And to keep the game alive for these people, you need to make the game a live service with regular updates. Now, personally, I think the future is having a disconnect between these two versions of the game. If you want to experience the campaign, you have to pay the base fee. But if you just want to jump straight into the live service endgame stuff, game is free to play. I think that's what's most fair, and I do think that's the way things are going to go in the future. Moving on to other gaming news stories of the week, we're going to round up a couple more Game of the Year winners. IGN gave their Game of the Year award to Metaphor ReFantazio. It's been a big year for JRPGs. If you're into that genre, then you've surely already played Metaphor, but if you haven't, then you definitely got to check it out. And the Indie Game Awards 2024, they gave their Game of the Year to Balatro. No big surprise there. I keep hearing about how awesome this game is. Seems to be a poker roguelite. I'm not really interested in poker, but everyone is raving about this game, so what do you folks think? Should I check it out? Then in some No Rest for the Wicked news, and if you think Path of Exile 2 is a Souls-like ARPG, well, Wicked is the real Souls-like ARPG. Anyway, Wicked has been in early access since April 2024, and things have been kind of quiet for a while from the dev team. But they just announced that they'll be kicking off 2025 with a new announcement in January. They've been hard at work on their next big content and feature updates, and I'm hoping that we're going to get the announcement for multiplayer in January. Fingers crossed for that. Then in some industry news, there have been major layoffs at GOG.com. That's the digital distribution platform for mostly old video games. According to Polish outlet CD Action, 20 to 30 people lost their jobs, representing about a fifth of the employees at GOG. And apparently annual turnover at the company is estimated at 30% of the entire staff. Seems the company is just having trouble turning a profit, which is unfortunate but not terribly surprising when your business model is mostly benevolent, maintaining old games free of DRM. I almost feel like something like GOG should be run as a non-profit and funded by donations like Wikipedia. Then in some quick Indiana Jones news, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle was the #2 best-selling video game for the week ending December 14th with respect to US dollar sales, trailing only behind Call of Duty Black Ops 6. The game released on December 9th and has been really well received. On OpenCritic, it has an 87 out of 100 top critic average score, with 94% of critics recommending the game. And on Steam, 91% of user reviews are positive. It seems to just overall really convey the fun of the old indie movies, and I hear they especially nail the sound effects. The Indiana Jones films always had the best punch sound effects, and the game apparently lives up to it. And voice actor Troy Baker apparently does an excellent Harrison Ford.
Out of my way, pal!
Lastly, in some Steam news, Valve released details on what games earned the most money on Steam throughout 2024, and in no particular order, the top 12 games were Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, Palworld, PUBG, Elden Ring, Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, Black Ops 6, Apex Legends, Helldivers 2, Baldur's Gate 3, and Destiny 2. Only 5 of those games were actually released in 2024. And if we only account for games released in 2024, then the top 12 becomes Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, Path of Exile 2, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Black Myth Wukong, Dragon's Dogma 2, NBA 2K25, Helldivers 2, Manor Lords, Palworld, Space Marine 2, Black Ops 6, EA Sports FC 25. Really happy to see Path of Exile 2, Manor Lords, Helldivers 2, and Space Marine 2 on that list. And that's going to wrap up this week's video, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discussed the new ARPG coming from former key Diablo 2 devs. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more gaming content.